Hello and welcome back to Bennetts BikeSocial. I'm Michael Mann and this is episode 26 of our Better Riding series powered by Honda Motorcycles UK. Well, joining me as always is our expert motorbike coach from across the other side of the world. It's Mark McVeigh. Let's bring him in.
G'day, Michael. How are you going there today?
Hello, buddy. I'm fabulous. Thank you very much for asking. I'm all right. How about you?
Not too bad, not too bad. I like your tan. It looks like you've been in the sun somewhere.
Yeah, sunny Spain on a launch of a motorbike. There's a lot of Honda, so I can't think what it is. Anyway, onwards. Better riding. What are we learning about today, Mr. McVeigh?
Yes, episode 26. How far can I lean? The most asked question ever.
Interesting. All right, go on. How far can I lean?
Well, yeah, maybe it's the most asked question, but maybe also the most misunderstood. You know, you're in the pub or the forum or the YouTube rabbit hole, and then usually you get the photo with the knee on the deck and the tire edges scrubbed in, if you like.
Yeah, they must be leaning at least as far as Marc Marquez or others. It beckons the conversation, doesn't it, about bravado, and it actually does more lean equal more skill. I mean, I know that a lot of motorbikes nowadays give you a lean sensitive angle, don't they? They show you exactly how far you have lent, so you can kind of demonstrate that. Is that the new? Oh, you'll never guess how fast I went. Is it now? Oh, you'll never guess how far I lent.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's clean it up. We've got our motorbike coach in your pocket, so let's jump in there and see if we can get some answers. So if we type in, how far can I lean? I'll just quickly flick through the answer, and then we can do a bit more of a deep dive. But essentially, we've got talks about traction rather than, having the lean angle as the goal. Talks about riding fundamentals. There's a bit of a checklist for that. Talks about, the body position. We roughly are 1/3 of combined mass of the bike and rider. So that makes a difference. Where to practice and what to do when you're practicing. And then we've got some cues and checkpoints to look out for, common mistakes, and then a bit of safety information. There's no kind of safe maximum lean angle. And then further reading. So the first thing to talk about is understanding grip. So we'll do a bit more of a deep dive into that. But first, let's have a reminder, of our riding system, because we'll talk about that in the video. So, we use the 3 pillars of skill, craft, and mind. And, skill is the machine control, and that's important, in case of a surprise, if you like. And then craft is our, roadcraft defensive knowledge and ability to anticipate hazards and reduce the reliance on skill. And then the third one, mind, that's kind of our attitude, cognitive performance and growth mindset, that type of stuff. So now we've got that kind of just a bit of a refresher. Modern tires are amazing, right? Essentially, most road tires can generate a G grip. And that's just amazing. But, we after training, 10,000, I was talking to Steve the other night, it's probably more like 20. We'll have to do the numbers, but 10,000 riders. I know that most riders underestimate the grip, and then they kind of panic when they get a surprise. And that's the key thing that we need to talk about.
Yeah, and that doesn't really surprise me when we do that, because the amount of comments and interest that we've had in this series when we've spoken about grip before. Obviously, there's no end of different types of tire and of pressures and of situations and, mechanical grip and tire grip and also our ability too. And I'm sure we'll get into that. But primarily then, how do we as riders start to understand what grip is?
Yeah, well, the number one method, for the best way understanding grip is actually doing emergency stop drills. So, here's the fine Mr. Mann demonstrating on the Honda. And, it's really important, the bikes can do 1G of brakes, right? And they've got ABS. So, it's probably the safest way to build up. So, we see most riders and this is post-license training, maybe they're coming and they give us the first drill, first stop, and maybe it's like 0.4 of a G or half a G at best. That's generally, what we see as an average. And then we work with the rider to build that up, more brake pressure, progressive application, etc., etc. And riders, build themselves up step by step to get closer to that 1G. And as they're doing that, they're really quite they're almost like their eyes are like dinner plates. They cannot believe, what it feels like when they're getting closer to the G. And they learn about, loading the tire and how to set up and then progressively apply that force so you don't surprise the tire. So it's a really simple, straightforward way to start understanding grip.
It's not necessarily about gripping corners, is it here? We're talking about grip in a straight line. So if you're hanging onto the brake, I can't remember in that example, on that emergency stop example, I can't remember what figure I managed with the brake pressure. But I guess it was nowhere near 1G, but it was still plenty. And I was hanging onto that brake because, I wanted to stop for the demonstration. But it's interesting how we talk about, grip, because as soon as I hear the word grip, I always, my imagination goes to, or my mind goes to cornering grip, but it's not, is it? It's sometimes it's a bit more about straight line grip.
The grip in the corner is what we really want to understand, but the first step towards that is with the emergency stop. And when people start feeling the grip of the tire, they get a better understanding, and it's a safer way to test it out before the corner, if that makes sense. And we got some data. And, if you look here, you can see the emergency stop. And, we've got this graph here, which is the green, which is the coach. And you can see the G, and this is on street tire. So it looks like it's about 1.2 G, which is, that's a good stop. You can see the really high rate of application. That's very steep, which is good, because you want to be stopping as soon as possible. And there's also, it's very progressive. Okay, so once they've applied the brake pressure, they keep squeezing that lever until they come to a complete stop. That's the key thing. And then you compare that to the student. It's obviously, that line's a lot flatter, so the rate of application's a lot less. And then it's not quite as progressive. And you see this a lot where the student gets surprised and they kind of let the brake off. It's like a fearful reaction. And then they'll kind of, oh, right, okay, they'll apply it again. So that is just like a super common theme that we see with emergency brakes. But the key thing is, we want to understand the grip in the corner because we're talking about lean. But step one, do the emergency stops and feel that tire and feel the grip. And then the next step, so we're getting into the corner now, is essentially, ride around in circles. Mark out a big circle. It's very easy to do. Find a quiet car park somewhere and, ride around in circles. Lean a bit more, apply a bit more throttle, and have a bit of a play and see how it works out. And it's just the practice. And then the ultimate is, doing the figure of 8. And, then you start, bringing in lean different ways and braking, trail braking, all those different skills. But the main thing is, 20 hours to get your license versus thousands of hours of mastery. And, riders, you must put in the work. Plus, it's fun. That's the key thing.
Yeah, it has to be, doesn't it? What else? The app is very, very interesting, and thanks for demonstrating it here. When is it available, Mark, by the way? Is it out now?
No, it's not quite ready yet. We're doing a bit of testing on the QC. It's obviously got to give the right advice. So it is AI, but it refers to our proprietary riding system. It doesn't go on the internet or YouTube or anything, but it's just really the testing to make sure it's 100%. But it won't be far away.
Cool. It looks really, really smart. We've had some questions about it already, didn't we? So should we go a bit deeper then? What else can we find out from the app?
Yeah, so basically the next step is riding fundamentals, okay? So we're talking about here, it's reference point, safety bubble, etc., etc. And it's kind of, the riding fundamentals are like a checklist, but they're completely dynamic. So it depends on the conditions and it depends on the rider's ability. So they're the kind of like things that you need to bear in mind. So the first thing to talk about is the reference points. So, we've got the screen up here shows, where we're braking, where we turn in, apex in the middle of the corner, and the exit. So these are really important aspects of cornering, and we'll talk about those, as we go through. They're important to help you not get lost in the turn. So that's the key thing. And then the next thing we talk about is obviously the safety bubble. Now, that's a really key part of our riding system, and our riding system sort of called Halo. And if you look at this, you can see, we'll just run it through. You can see this is the rider's position for the car, on the wrong side of the white line, essentially. And if we run this back and play it again, you can see the rider's coming in. The safety bubble's as big as it can be because there's no hazards, and his position's in the middle of the road. And then as he approaches the right hand, he or she, position 1, to see and to be seen. And then so the safety bubble then gets smaller, right? Because you've got you got the hazards a bit closer to the side of the road, and you adjust your speed to suit. And then the rider notices, all right, there's a car wayward. So now we're in red. So that's basically slowing down, getting ready to stop. And it's just hanging out in line position 1 to make sure that there's not going to be a problem with that car. And you can see if the rider was cornering, and when the corner is kind of open, if he was apexing in the line position 3, that would be a big problem. So very important, with a safety bubble to understand that concept. And then after the hazard's gone, then we're green. The rider can return to, line position 3 and carry on. So that's a very important technique and system to understand. And then the next thing it talks about is appropriate speed. Now, this is super interesting, appropriate speed, because this basically, your cornering speed dictates, your lean angle. So more speed for the same corner radius equals more lean required. So that's really important to understand.
Well, yes, it is, and we can go off on a whole new rabbit hole here, couldn't we? And talk about that. But how is there a sort of a generic way of understanding how I would know what my appropriate speed is?
Yeah, so the part of the fundamentals to understand is your appropriate speed for the situation. So the hazards, the road surface, if it's a corner, and your ability. And that is, can you stop in your line within the distance you can see? That's the key thing.
How do I know what distance I can stop within?
Well, this is the thing, and this is the theme. It's practice makes perfect. So if we look at this reel, we're in a controlled environment. I'll let it run through, and then we'll break it down. And this is really the safest way to do it. Now, this guy his name is Sam. I remember him because I was so impressed with him. He's about 70. So there's a few things to understand in this video. So the first thing is, you'll see up here, there's a little light, okay? And then there's a cone. So basically, when this light is triggered, there's a car on the wrong side of the road, and that's basically what he's trying to avoid. So when the light's not on, he basically follows his normal line, which is, staying in kind of line position 3, and then coming into 2, okay? And because that's, the optimum line there to see and be seen and to be using that safety bubble. And then if we start running the video through, we'll just frame by frame, you'll see now the light's on, okay? So he'll have seen that light. He's entering the corner, and you should see him appear in a second. But you can see he's still kind of in line position 3. Now, the road's wet as well, and there is a bit of a camber there too to consider. But you look, he's basically braking and swerving in the wet, and he's 70 years old, all right? And then he comes to a stop. Now, even if he didn't completely stop, he's taken so much speed out of the situation and got away from the hazard. That's a really fantastic outcome. And the reason for that is basically practice. This guy is absolutely amazing. So by practicing in a controlled environment, it's really the only safe way. And this means that appropriate speed is proportional to the proficiency of the rider.
So regardless of if you know what your bike's like, if you're understanding the conditions, if you've done all the practice, then appropriate speed, well, it's still going to be different for every rider, isn't it?
It is exactly right. It's completely dynamic. So that's really important. And, it's just all back to practicing. If you don't practice, you'll drop to the level of your training when you get a surprise. So that's that bit. And then if we go back and look in the app again, we're talking about the best line. Okay, now this is a good one. So if we talk about line selection and we run this video through, and then we'll come back and dissect it a little bit. So that's pretty straightforward. So let's roll it back and you see, so line position 1, okay. And then the rider comes in, it's kind of apexing in line position 2, okay. Now, you could argue that the road's wide open, okay, so he can see. So he could actually be apexing in line position 3, which would be a better thing because that means that it's a wider line, okay? And then he basically exits, or he or she, in line position 1. So ideally there, the best line is actually the widest line if it's safe to do.
Okay, why would that be?
Well, the wider the line, the less lean angle you need for the same corner speed. So essentially what you're doing is you're using less of your tire, less lean, and so you've got more grip. That's the key thing. So not a lot of people realize that. And the next thing that we look at is the body position, okay? And this is gold because it's really kind of misunderstood, like hanging off is kind of like trying to look fast, but body position is actually a tool for reducing motorcycle lean angle at a given speed and radius. So if you go around the corner at the same speed, the same radius, and you lean off a little bit, then you don't need to lean your bike as much. And you look at these, all of these Japanese police, the way they ride and they practice, and essentially they're moving their body to the inside. And that's, the combined center of mass. So you're about, roughly 1/3 of the combined mass of the rider and the bike stays more upright. And then the tire works, in the stronger part of the profile, and you gain a grip margin, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we've spoken, haven't we, in previous episodes, obviously not only about grip and about cornering, but about counter steering and about dropping that inside elbow and using your body, just in the last episode with ergonomics, for example.
Yeah.
And it's all, fascinating stuff. And I encourage everybody to keep looking at these episodes and kind of refreshing and then going out and practicing or even just sort of sitting on your bike and understanding what it is that we are trying to help make you a better rider and ultimately enjoy motorcycling a heck of a lot more. But exactly. Let's try and summarize this then, can we? If we,
I think, Michael, the key thing is lean angle. It's not a skill, it's an outcome. So, these highly skilled riders, they don't aim for lean angle. They aim for, precise line, using the safety bubble, progressively loading the tires, accurate speed control, and then lean angle appears when those things are all done well. And, I just love these big Hondas. I think these are like 1100s. And these guys are throwing them around. And obviously, it's in a controlled environment, car park cones, and they're leaning these bike hard, at relatively low speed. But of course, when they go on the road, they're riding with huge margins. Same rider, same bike, completely different intent. And it's really, the skill is all about machine control. That's the key aspect of it.
Yeah, sure. And understanding what the machine can do, understanding your ability as well. So more practice means that if you do get caught out in a situation, you're going to be able to do that because you trust in your ability and the bike's ability. Mark, you've got your own riding school. How do you train lean angles at your school?
Yeah, well, I guess the simple answer, we don't. In our modern riding system, that skills pillar, lean angle it's never trained in isolation. It's a byproduct, of those kind of correct inputs and, doing those drills. So, instead of asking the riders, to lean further, we're kind of measuring, what's their braking force before they turn in, what's their timing and accuracy, how stable are they with the throttle through the corner, how consistent are they with everything, throttle, brake, steering, body, vision. What's the quality of the reaction under surprise? So we're doing these, aviation principles. So, recreating the common crash scenario. So there is a kind of element of a surprise. It's as good as you can get without creating a real crash scenario. And then the repeatability from drill to drill. So just like those Japanese police, develop those skills. It's in a controlled environment. It doesn't happen by accident on a public road. And, when you're on the road and you get that surprise, that's when you fall back into your training, right?
Yeah, very true. All interesting stuff. Mark, thank you again. What have we got lined up for the next episode? Do you know?
Yes. Next episode is 27. And what comes into my mind is Casey Stoner, because I always put a number with the rider. So, but episode 27, where should I be looking in corners? So very much exploring vision, habits, target fixation, scanning, lifesavers, all that fun stuff.
I'm looking as far ahead as I can, Mark. There's the exit.
I've taught you well.
Brilliant. I think that's going to be, again, another interesting episode. And I'm sure there'll be lots of people who have got lots of thoughts about this particular subject we've been talking about today. So feel free to enter your comments in the YouTube comment section below, or come and find us at our brand new social media site that we own. It's called Bike Club. So just search for Bennetts Bike Club or BikeSocial Bike Club, and you can come and find us. Mark, thank you very much for your time today. And mate, we'll see you next time.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Cheers.
Brilliant. Yeah, don't forget to check out all of the other Better Riding episodes. I'll put the playlist to all of the other episodes in the description below or in the comment section below. Thank you also to Honda Motorcycles UK. Good. All right, we'll wrap it up there. See you next time.
Honda Motorcycles are supporting this series because safety is one of their key business pillars, and their quest for safety inspires their innovations in products, technology, and education, which is why they're committed to achieving zero traffic fatalities involving Honda mobility products worldwide by 2050.